Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Reed Duke, and in the feature match area, he's back. It's Luis Scott-Vargas. Haven't seen him out here at the GP level in a while. He's been a busy boy the last few years, and he's played in a few team GPs, a few of those here and there, but he has not recently played in any individual GPs. Again, it's been almost 2 years, I believe, since he's been one. We got him back in the feature match area. He is on Lance. Tyler Mollenkopf is on the other side of the battlefield. We don't actually know what he's on yet, but we're getting that information for you, and Reed will make you guess at it once we see something. You can see Reed with a good start here with a Mox Diamond.
Yeah, so that's a new card we haven't seen yet on camera. Mana Bond. It's like a super exploration, which it allows you to put all the lands from your hand, or as many as you choose, into play during your end step, but the catch is that you have to discard the rest of your hand. What does Luis discard in this particular case? Life from the Loam.
Is this real?
This is real. This is basically like a one card super hand for Luis. He had Mox Diamond, which accelerates his his play. He has Mana Bond, and then all the rest of his cards were either lands or Life from the Loam. So he's got everything he needs all set to go right here.
Wow, what an opening for Luis. Luis uses Thespian Stage to copy Ghost Quarter. He is going to he's going to dredge back a Life from the Loam. And he does have two more lands in the battlefield. Now, we did figure out, by the way, in the meantime here, Reed, what he's up against, and it's Elves, as evidenced by that Nettle Sentinel to kick things off for Tyler.
Yeah, this is a bit bittersweet for me, Marshall, because Elves is probably my favorite deck in Legacy. It's very likely what I would have played if I had been competing in this tournament. So I'm excited to see it on camera, but this is a pretty bad matchup for Elves, and Luis has a great start here. So
Luis just dumped his whole hand on the battlefield turn one.
Yeah.
Except for the one key card to put in his graveyard, which is where he wanted it.
The one saving grace is that Elves is a very fast deck, and it looks like Tyler might have a pretty sweet hand here with turn 2 Glimpse of Nature. And Luis, while he has a great start, he has a ton of resources, ton of permanents on the battlefield. He doesn't yet have a win condition, so if Luis bricks on a couple of dredges and Tyler just has one of those super fast Elves combo hands where he can win on the third turn, he can easily overpower the one Maze of Ith that's the only defensive permanent on Luis's side of the battlefield.
Yeah, Luis also doesn't know really anything about Elves on the other side. Like, he won't know how to play against it either. He just doesn't have much experience with the deck. Korean Ranger hits the battlefield here for Tyler. And Luis is once again going to copy Ghost Quarter with his Thespian Stage, and once again he's going to dredge. Does he hit any lands? No.
No, but he did hit.
There's a Punishing Fire.
He did hit a Punishing Fire, which is great here because you can see how much mana he has on the battlefield.
Including Grove. You need to run us through how this part works. We haven't seen it yet today.
That's right. The Punishing Fire combo is banned in Modern, even though both Punishing Fire and Grove of the Burn Willows are from Modern legal sets. But the way this works is you cast Punishing Fire, 2 mana burn spell, pretty straightforward at face value, but Grove of the Burn Willows allows you to give your opponent life at will, at instant speed, so you can sort of machine gun down your opponent's permanents, or given enough time, their life total by using Grove of the Burn Willows to recur Punishing Fire.
Korean Ranger lets you untap a target creature by returning a forest you control to its owner's hand. Of course, those bayous are both forests in addition to swamps, but doesn't make it easy to save your creatures from a card like Punishing Fire.
So, Marshall, this lands deck we saw in round 3, Jody Keith, a longtime lands expert, playing the deck. So this is a strategy that's popular among the Legacy aficionados who have been at it for many, many years. But I've also seen a couple of really talented pro players like Luis, and when I was walking around last round, Sam Pardee, picking up lands. It's certainly one of the most challenging decks to play in Legacy, or in any format for that matter. Nobody's going to argue that point.
Right.
But you will see some of these elite players picking it up as a way to combat Delver, which we believe to be the number one deck, at least in terms of number of players, that's going to be represented here at Grand Prix Seattle. Lance has a very good matchup against Delver.
Okay, so what just happened here? There was Ghost Quarter. It was a Thespian stage, but it was copying a Ghost Quarter, which hit Bayou, replaced with the Forest now. And then what actually happened after that? He cast Life from the Loam?
Yep, he casts Life from the Loam.
Okay.
Luis can afford to cash in lands at will here because Life from the Loam lets him return 3 from his graveyard, and Mana Bond lets him put any number into play. So Luis, being the super tight player that he is, just looking for any way to get free value from his lands rather than just being lazy and making an obvious play.
So it's a different look for Luis this round. I see. Nettle Sentinel looks like it's about to get frisky. Pretty easy to untap that. Every creature in his deck, in fact, every spell in his deck does so.
So I got to tell you, Marshall, I think this is Tyler Mollenkopf's window here. He has to make something very big happen this turn, or else things are just going to slip away from him against that Punishing Fire combo. So the fact that he begins his turn with attacking there is a big problem because Elves, though it's a combo deck, it actually the final win is by attacking after a Craterhoof Behemoth. So the fact that Tyler begins his turn by attacking with Nettle Sentinel indicates that he's not going to win the game this turn, and indeed we see him not combo off.
So Luis is going to use his Grove of the Burn Willows to gain a life, get that Punishing Fire back into his hand. Now he's got the engine rolling here with Life from the Loam. He's going to dredge that, see what he hits, and he's going to separate out the lands, and of course the Punishing Fire, the other card he can get back. There is a Wasteland in there now, as well as the Ghost Quarter. And this actually does get interesting. I teased Luis earlier about not knowing how the Elves deck worked, but of course he won the Pro Tour with a similar build. It was a different format, but a lot of the same cards. And knowing which cards to kill with Punishing Fire could be really relevant here.
Yeah, Luis really put Elves on the map. That was Pro Tour Berlin back in when we used to have Extended as a format, but that was really when Nettle Sentinel and Heritage Druid were first printed, and that was the debut of the Elf combo deck. Since then, and transitioning into Legacy, Elves has become super, super powerful. I mean, it was good back then. Now it's amazing, with Gaia's Cradle being personally my pick for the most powerful card that's legal in Legacy.
Just raw power.
Yeah, I mean, this is a card it's just so... you see it in action, you're like, I can't believe this is real. It's like a Tolarian Academy.
Yeah.
People work hard to play with City of Traders and Ancient Tomb, and Gaia's Cradle can produce much more mana and all-colored mana. But anyway, I won't get hung up on Gaia's Cradle. Elves has a lot of other amazing things going for it, including Green Sun Zenith, Glimpse of Nature, Natural Order, with Craterhoof Behemoth just being the absolute perfect win condition for this deck. You can win via a quick Natural Order for Craterhoof Behemoth, or you can easily cast Green Sun Zenith for X equals 8 when you get Gaia's Cradle and Heritage Druid going.
So Luis actually taking a little bit of time, and that's an interesting thing for him, because anybody who's seen Luis play in the feature match area knows how quickly he processes this kind of information and comes up with the lines of play, but he's really trying to map out exactly how he wants to do this. He's played a bit with this lands deck, but this is, he's not a lands deck specialist. This is the first major tournament he's played with it. The real specialist that comes to mind for lands is Jarvis Yu. He won the last GP Seattle that was Legacy with that deck, and boy, he put on a clinic read. It was awesome to watch him play that deck. He's just snapping off everything.
It's funny you mentioned, Marshall. I actually played a Team Open. It was one of the Legacy Modern Standard tournaments, a Team Star City Games Open, with Jarvis on my team.
Must be nice.
As you would predict, him in our Legacy seat playing lands, but sometimes I would finish my match early and I would pull my chair over to Jarvis and be watching his game, and you know what? I just have no idea. I can't contribute to this game. I can't help you at all. I'm going to go help our standard player.
Oh, that is too funny. Yeah, definitely best you just get out of the way. By the way, of note here, Tyler has 2 forests in his library. Total. Like his deck list has only 2 forests, so getting that forest killed here means no replacements. The Wasteland took out the Horizon Canopy on the battlefield, and now Tyler's just down to a forest.
Yeah, so this is a pattern you see with the lands deck. They take a couple turns to, we'll call it, fight through.
There's your boy.
Yeah, there's Gaia's Cradle.
Now it only tapped for a meager 2 mana here, and Luis is going to have his target set on that for sure. But there is a replacement one. I wonder if Luis will be thinking about a potential replacement in hand for Tyler. Not that he can do much about it, but the fact that Tyler just sort of willingly ran a cradle out there would lead you to think, like, you wouldn't just throw it away to cast one creature, would you?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's an important point also because there are two approaches Luis could take to this situation, either killing the Gaia's Cradle itself via Wasteland or Ghost Quarter, or by attacking the creatures of Tyler Mollenkopf, spending his mana and his land drops on the Punishing Fire combo rather than the Wastelands.
Mm-hmm.
So if, like you said, he draws the same conclusion that Tyler could easily have a second Cradle in hand, we'll probably see him go for the Punishing Fire.
Wow. And once again, Mana Bond is an absolute wrecking ball. Luis goes, I'll go to end step, reveal my hand. It's all lands, and I'm going to destroy your entire mana base. You may go.
Right.
Wow.
So to finish that thought from a moment ago, you see the lands deck fight through the number of basic lands in the opponent's library by activating Ghost Quarter at a loss for the first couple of activations. Your opponent actually does get to search and replace it with the basic land, but most Legacy decks are playing, in the ballpark of 0 to 3 basics, and once those are gone, then those Ghost Quarters just become full strip mines, and you can actually lock your opponent out of the game by killing every land that they play.
Yeah, the lands deck is like super in win mode, by the way, when they start targeting fetch lands, because they're just like, go ahead, get something, I got another way to kill it.
Right, the lands deck can get so far ahead on resources, and you see Luis effectively... he's basically drawing 4 cards per turn here, right? Because he's dredging Life from the Loam, and he's casting and returning Punishing Fire.
This is absurd.
So he's drawing 4 cards per turn and getting to use them all. It's the opponent just gets buried.
Right. And, this Punishing Fire, of course, so great at picking apart the little tiny pieces of the puzzle here from the Elves deck. They're all vulnerable to these spells, but normally the deck can be vulnerable enough or resilient enough that sure, you get to use a lightning bolt on a key piece, but they can piece things back together. But repeatable Punishing Fire over and over and over has put real hurting on Tyler Mollenkopf's board. And once again, he's just stuck with 4 or 5 cards in hand and just can't seem to dig his way out.
And here you see the actual nail in the coffin. Luis puts Dark Depths into play alongside Thespian Stage. Tyler sees the writing on the wall.
And game number 1 goes to Luis Scott-Vargas. Welcome back to the feature match area, Luis. Game number 1 for you, but you're going to have to win one of the next 2 to take down this match and go to 5-0. Interestingly, that Punishing Fire is also just a win condition, right? Like, it's a little slow, but he could just sit there and start throwing it at Tyler.
Yeah, Luis didn't need Merit Lage to win that game. He could have done it in a slow, meticulous way, but it, certainly expedited the process.
Yeah. Wow. I'll tell you what, the card that really stood out from that first game, just that looked kind of over the top powerful, was that Mana Bond. It allowed for Luis to have a really fast start, dumping his entire hand and getting Life from the Loam in the graveyard right off the bat. And then even later, when you think, okay, maybe it's not quite so good in the mid to late part of the game, it actually was. He was able to leverage Life from the Loam to repeat those effects multiple times.
I'm glad you highlighted that, Marshall, because Mana Bond is very much a fringe card in this lands deck. It's, in a way, an old-fashioned card. It's a holdover from when the deck actually used to play 43 lands. You used to see 4 explorations alongside, 2 to 3 Mana Bonds. Now many lands players, including Jarvis, who we talked about a moment ago,
Oh, I can see why you'd want to play 1, though, right? The second one's completely useless, right? And
a subtle factor about this card as opposed to Exploration is that you don't get the lands until your end step. So, for example, if you had a play pattern like every turn you are wastelanding something and then casting Life from the Loam to get back the wasteland, it can become slightly less convenient when you can't actually take your actions and then cast Life from the Loam afterwards. You have to put the wasteland in your hand and then wait till the end of the turn to drop everything into play. A small factor, but these things come up.
Chat said that Life from the Loam at that later point in the game for Luis was Ancestral Recall with buyback.
Yes.
I mean, that engine is extremely impressive when it gets rolling.
Right, we've talked about already so far in this broadcast how it's difficult to get ahead in resources.
Right.
In Legacy, when you see a Delver mirror match or Delver against Control, they're fighting so hard, tooth and nail, for every little 2-for-1 advantage. And then you have a deck like Lands that just produces this sort of inexorable engine to bury the opponent.
It is funny. Legacy is weird like that. As you mentioned, we were talking earlier about how there's a lot of cantrips. Like, you are manipulating your library a lot, but not necessarily drawing a lot of extra cards. But when Legacy does get to that point, it's dumb. Right? It's just like, he goes from really not having a way to get card advantage to drawing, in his deck, the equivalent of 3 free spells per turn, casting them all that same turn and doing it every turn for the rest of the game. It's like, all right, well, I guess we turned the corner here.
But that's what's so fun
I saw
about
Tabernacle
Legacy
in his opener here.
Is, the Lands deck and the Elves deck, for that matter, they eschew the most efficient cards that are the highlights of the Legacy format. They don't get to play with Brainstorm. They don't get to play with Lightning Bolt, Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, stuff like that. But once they've paid these deck building costs of being very focused on their game plan, they reap the rewards of super powerful cards like Life from the Loam and Gaia's Cradle. So it's just a judgment call whether you want to be sleek, efficient, low to the ground and play a Delver deck, or whether you want to take a bit more of a gamble and build a focus deck that can make use of some of these powerful engines available.
By the way, here we go for Luis. Is that a Vortex?
Molten Vortex. Luis just hitting us with all the niche one-of cards, and there's another one.
There's the Tabernacle Pendrell Veil as well.
All right, Marshall, let's take them one at a time. So Molten Vortex.
Yeah.
This card is reminiscent of Seismic Assault, but a lot more affordable in being 1 mana. But this is great to pair with Life from the Loam. It's an alternative to the Punishing Fire combo, but it's going to accomplish the same thing against Elves in just allowing many of Luis's mana and resources to transition into removal spells. Perfect against a deck that's based around 1 and 2 toughness creatures. Now we have the Tabernacle at Pendrell Veil, a real hoser of creature swarm decks. This is just an absolutely brutal card. It's a land that effectively gives all creatures an upkeep cost of 1 mana. So that means when Tyler Mollenkopf untaps with 4 elves in play, for each one of those elves, he has to either pay 1 mana or sacrifice it.
That could get annoying.
Technically destroyed, not sacrificed.
That's a Wirewood symbiote for Tyler, but the tax is real here. Just to keep his creatures on the battlefield, he's going to have to tap all of his lands, at least for the early. Oh my God, Luis, easy, buddy. You don't want to use them all up this early in the tournament. Now he's got Chalice of the Void on 1. Look at Tyler. He's like, what in the world is happening?
You're starting to see why I mentioned Lands being a tough matchup for Elves combo.
Oh my God, you were not joking.
The thing is, Lands has all of these troublesome, annoying angles against Elves. We're talking about the Tabernacle. We're talking about the Punishing Fire combo, Chalice of the Void off the sideboard, Wasteland, Ghost
Vortex is somehow on that list.
Yeah, and then on top of all of that, sometimes Lands is just faster than you in making a 20/20 on turn 2. So when you play Elves, Reanimator and Storm are tough matchups, but at least you can just pack your sideboard full of cards that are great against those. With Lands, you're almost at a loss. What do I do? I can board in an Abrupt Decay to destroy the Chalice, but then that's going to look stupid when my opponent has turn 2 Merit Lage. I can board in Diabolic Edict, but then what if they lock me out with Punishing Fire? It's there's not any one thing you can do that's going to cover all of your bases. So it's Well, you're not dead in the water. You're still a really fast, powerful deck, and you can get your own great draws. You have a lot to fight through.
He has Chalice on 1, Molten Vortex, Tabernacle, and now he has Dark Depths with Thespian Stage 2. Come on, Luis. The only good news for Tyler is that Tabernacle doesn't tap for mana.
Neither does Dark Depths.
Right.
So actually, that you bring up a great point that Luis can't combo off just yet. He only has access to Mox Diamond and Thespian Stage as his only mana sources.
Right, so he's still going to need to find another mana source, but still, this looks horrendous for Tyler. Luis is laying it on a little thick at this point. I mean, how in the world is Tyler supposed to get out of this? Now
well,
he's
I will
for his
point out, Tyler searches up Taiga, which is not a card you often see in Elves, but it's the reason he searched for that is he came very well prepared for this matchup with Blood Moon in his sideboard.
Oh, interesting.
And to be honest with you, that's what you have to do if you want to have a really good lands matchup with Elves, is you need just a super targeted hate card in something like Blood Moon.
Meanwhile, the beatdown does continue for Tyler, though this doesn't seem like a viable way to actually win the game.
So Tyler has attacked, and Luis is thinking about activating Molten Vortex. Now, one thing that could have happened here is Tyler thought for quite a long time and made some body language movements in his pre-combat main phase. That's something that a player of Luis's caliber... although there aren't very many players of Luis's caliber. I should say Luis in particular, something that Luis in particular is going to pick up on. So if he had read Tyler for Gaia's Cradle, and then Tyler went to combat, that might be a moment where Luis thinks, let me see what I can do to combat a possible Gaia's Cradle. Luis plays Wasteland. Makes an interesting judgment call. The Gaia's Cradle, just by itself, can neutralize the effect of Tabernacle at Pendrel Vale. In other words, the Tabernacle requires 1 mana to be spent for each creature, and Gaia's Cradle produces 1 mana for each creature. So those two can cancel each other out. Luis electing not to use the Wasteland on Gaia's Cradle, instead prioritizing his ability to activate Thespian Stage and make a 2020 Merit Lage token this turn, cutting the clock of Tyler Mollenkopf. Let's see if that decision pays off for him.
Yeah, I mean, Luis is just basically saying, you can't... it's unlikely that you actually kill me this turn. Right? Like
that is the gamble that Luis is taking.
Right.
No, I didn't. I'm also just bad at
It's possible that Tyler could win this turn, though. He has Glimpse of Nature in his hand, which is the engine card of the Elves combo. We haven't seen him combo off yet, but this could be a golden opportunity for him to do so. I think we're probably going to see him start his turn with Glimpse of Nature. I guess not against Chalice of the Void.
Right. And he keeps looking down at his hand like, well, none of this really adds up the way I want it to. Luis combining multiple heavily disruptive elements against Tyler, and you see just all he can do is shake his head. Every time he tries to come up with a line of play to start casting some stuff, he just gets thwarted. And in the meantime, Luis is sitting there threatening 2020.
It's true. The calculated risk that I mentioned a moment ago is a lot less of a risk now that I identify the Chalice of the Void on the battlefield. Luis could still be at risk to something like Natural Order for Craterhoof Behemoth, but Tyler would need, if he wants to combo off the Glimpse of Nature, to destroy the Chalice via an Abrupt Decay or something like a Reclamation Sage.
He's going to go for Green Sun Zenith for 2. And just draw a card with Elvish Visionary. So he continues to build out his board. Like you said, the Gaia's Cradle offsetting the Tabernacle, but what's going to offset a 2020 Flying Indestructible?
At a quick glance, I see one card that could potentially answer that from Tyler, which is a one of Caracas in his sideboard.
Is this the lamest token ever? They got like one of those label makers from the office supply store on, and he says, I'll make one of these and attack. And Tyler says, I think I've had about enough of this nonsense. Luis Scott-Vargas improves to 5-0 with his lands deck.
He's still got it, Marshall.
It looks like he's still got it. Brushing off the sleeves and getting back in the feature match area is Luis. It's always nice to see him back down there, except for, of course, for one person, and in this case that was Tyler, who says, really? And Luis is able to get the job done in impressive fashion. I think that match did a good job of showing some of the different angles that you can see the lands deck can hit, even though at first glance you might think it's a little more one-dimensional than that.
Yeah. Luis really just covered all his bases in that game. You saw him win eventually with Merit Lage, but both times it was like turn 5, 6, 7. He really dismantled the Elves deck between Chalice of the Void and Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale in the second game, but generally just the creature removal, Punishing Fire, and Molten Vortex.
Yeah, he didn't even have to activate the Vortex, but he had that covered too. Now, that's the type of thing that really does best, of course, with like a Life from the Loam engine, where you're feeding a bunch of lands into your hand that you can then discard to Molten Vortex, but he didn't even need it. He just like simply pre-blanked all of the cards. And the best thing that Tyler could do was just try to keep up with the Gaia's Cradle, and that did not get the job done. Never really got on his feet, and Luis ended up taking down the match. We're bringing you Legacy here from Seattle. Thanks so much for coming along. It's nice to have you. That's Reduke. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. And we're actually going to have a little chat here with Luis in just a minute as well, and see how his day's going, how it feels to dust off those sleeves, and maybe what nonsense comes out of his mouth if we put a camera on. But yeah, we're bringing you Legacy all day today and all day tomorrow. But this is a special GP. There's actually 2 GPs taking place this weekend here in Seattle. We've got a standard GP as well, and we're going to be bringing you that on Sunday, the full second day of that. It sounds like Luis is ready for his interview down at the Future Match area. Luis, what's up, buddy? Marshall and Reed in the booth. Nice little victory there. It looks pretty decisive.
Yeah, I'm just trying to decide what nonsense to spew here since I don't want to.
Wait, did you have your headset on already?
Oh, yeah.
So that matchup looked really easy for you.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that lands is pretty bad against combo, except Elves, because Elves is a creature-based combo, and the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale and Punishing Fire just goes such a long way at kind of reducing their ability to do anything. And yeah, my draws were pretty good. Mana Bond Loam 5 land is the dream draw. And
yeah. Reed was still going over, okay, this is what Mana Bond does, and in the meantime, you dumped your whole hand on the board and put Life from the Loam in the graveyard somehow. Not too bad. Now, you only run one of those Mana Bonds in your deck, though, right?
Yeah, it's not as good as Exploration on balance, and especially in post-board games like I boarded it out, because you board in a bunch more spells like, Sphere of Resistance and Molten Vortex, Drop of Honey, that sort of thing.
That's not. You have Drop of Honey in there too?
Yeah, I actually had it in my hand game too, and it was kind of awkward where I could choose between playing. Like, I could have played Chalice for 1 on turn 1 with Mox Diamond, but the other cards in my hand were a Molten Vortex and a Drop of Honey, so I didn't really want to shut off all my own spells. I ended up playing the Chalice on turn 2, as you saw, and that meant I couldn't actually play Drop of Honey, and then I immediately drew Gamble. So it didn't work out great in that regard, but I already had everything I needed.
Yeah, I was going to say, you did have an Elves player facing down Molten Vortex, a Chalice on 1, and you had a Tabernacle in play.
Yeah.
It didn't look too bad for you in the early stages. Luis, how does it feel to dust off the sleeves and play in one of these individual GPs? It's been a little while for you.
Yeah, it's actually been, I think about 2 years since I played an individual GP. I played a couple team ones here and there. Feels pretty good. I forgot what redeeming buys feels like, and that was pretty nice. But yeah, my day's going well so far, and I'm glad I get to play again. Lands is a really fun deck, and I actually really enjoy playing it. I've been jamming it for months now, so I've been pretty happy with it.
Okay.
What made you choose the Lands deck? Is it simply because you enjoy it, or does it have some kind of particular strength for the field you expected?
It's both. Part of it is coming into this Legacy tournament. The last couple times I played Legacy at a Grand Prix, I felt like I picked up my deck, like a week or two before, and it wasn't as well versed with the ins and outs. So I just wanted to pick a deck well ahead of time, especially since I go to so few tournaments now. And so I settled on lands because I think it's pretty good against the fair blue decks or random creature decks, and is really just bad against combo. But I feel that combo is somewhat underrepresented, especially at Grand Prix. So I kind of locked it in 2 months ago, and it wasn't really going to change my mind. Even though I don't necessarily think it's the best deck, I do enjoy playing it a lot, which is important, and I think it is good.
You've been enjoying Legacy, Luis. It's a format we don't get to play at the professional level too often. We've got a few team trios events where there's one seat for it, but that's usually the exception. And now you get 1 or 2 Legacy GPs a year. You've been enjoying it?
Yeah, I think once Sensei's Divining Top got banned, Legacy became much more enjoyable to me. I think that card is a stain on Magic's history.
Yeah,
so
I am well aware of your feelings on that one. Yeah.
Literally the last time I got an unintentional draw was with Sensei's Divining Top on both sides of the battlefield.
Uh-huh.
And I'm, I would have felt obliged to play Miracles. I played that the last time I played Legacy, which was a couple years ago. And I'm just glad that you can still play Miracles if you want, but I'm glad that it's no longer a requirement. I believe Miracles before the top ban was just the best deck by so much.
Okay. Well, Luis, thanks so much for taking the time, and you're 5-0, buddy. Good luck the rest of the way.
Thanks.
See ya. It's always good to see Luis, shuffling up and attacking, or in this case, attacking with 2020s as he was meant to do.
Interesting concept, feeling obliged to play a deck, but being really unhappy about it. But
has that never happened to you?
Well, Miracles is probably the deck that fits the bill most closely. And we haven't really mentioned Sensei's Divining Top, but that was the last major change in the Legacy format, was the banning of Sensei's Divining Top, which Miracles, effectively blue-white control with Sensei's Divining Top and counterbalance, was a very oppressive strategy, had very few weaknesses that you could exploit, and it led to these very boring, meticulous board states where you would just know you're going to lose, but it would still take 10 or 15 minutes for it to actually... for the nail to be driven into the coffin.
Yeah.
But now